I feel like almost everyone has uh, that one specific relationship from their past that feels less like a finished memory and more like a book where
Yeah.
the final chapter was just violently torn out.
Absolutely. It's a universal experience, really.
Right. You're holding this story
Yeah.
and you know the characters intimately. The plot was building up to something incredible and then just nothing, just blank pages.
Just a sudden stop.
Yeah. And it leaves you sitting there in the quiet, completely bewildered, just asking yourself, what on earth just happened? So today we are doing a deep dive into the anatomy of these abruptly ended connections.
It's a really complex topic.
It is. And we're drawing heavily today from this fascinating piece called Echoes of the Heart, Unfinished Love and Future Soulmates, along with the rather unconventional work of Tina Aldea Psychic.
Which is a really interesting combination of sources, I have to say.
Definitely. And our mission here is to decode the mystery of these unfinished love stories, figure out why some intense connections just end so abruptly, and, explore how to pivot from lingering in that past to being ready for a future soulmate. So, okay, let's unpack this because there is a massive cognitive difference between a standard breakup and a genuinely unfinished story.
Well, there is actually a physiological difference, too. I mean, we are narrative creatures by nature.
Right, we love a good beginning, middle, and end.
Exactly. Our brains rely on this psychological mechanism where the hippocampus basically attempts to sequence events. It needs that clear beginning, middle, and end so the experience can be filed away into long-term memory.
So we can just put it in a box on a shelf.
Yeah, pretty much. And a standard breakup, even a really devastating one, it usually has a visible trajectory. You can look back and trace the incompatible life goals or maybe the fading affection.
Right, you can see the cracks forming.
Exactly. The brain understands a cause and effect, so it closes the file. But when a profound connection ends abruptly without any clear closure, that filing process is just interrupted.
It just stalls out.
It does. The amygdala, which processes our emotional responses, it treats that unresolved relationship as an active, ongoing problem that still needs solving right now.
Wow. That explains the lingering intensity perfectly, actually. I mean, if we think about a normal breakup, it's like watching a movie that naturally concludes. The credits roll, you feel sad, but you leave the theater.
Yeah.
The filing system worked.
Right, the story's over.
But an unfinished love story is, it's like watching this gripping film, getting fully invested. And right before the climax, the power to the entire building just goes out.
That is a perfect analogy.
And it's not just the dark that bothers you, right?
Yeah.
It's that your brain is now stuck perpetually trying to write the ending. You literally cannot process the data.
Yeah, and because your brain is desperately trying to close that open loop, it forces you into this state of hyper-focus on the missing partner.
Just constantly analyzing.
Constantly. And this isn't just feeling a bit nostalgic. It manifests as a profound, lingering emotional attachment that really defies logic. People report constantly analyzing memories, feeling this palpable emotional connection across vast geographical distances.
Like they can still feel the person.
Exactly. Or having frequent, highly vivid dreams about them, or experiencing bizarre, repeated coincidences. Hearing their name everywhere, seeing their favorite obscure book in a random coffee shop.
Which makes people feel like they are completely losing their grip on reality. I mean, I would think I was going crazy.
Oh, it creates a massive sense of cognitive dissonance. What's fascinating here is how this dissonance forces people to choose between two totally opposing interpretations of their own lives.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on one hand, you have the fatalistic view. These coincidences are evidence of destiny, and the universe is screaming that the story isn't over.
Right, the rom-com interpretation.
Yes. But then on the other hand, you have the clinical view, that this is simply a stubborn emotional attachment, an inability to let go, or, perhaps a trauma bond.
Let's actually pause on that term for a second, trauma bond, because I feel like it gets thrown around so casually in pop culture right now as a synonym for just, missing someone deeply. But it's a very specific mechanism, isn't it?
It really is, and it's important not to misuse it. A trauma bond is a psychological response to a cycle of abuse or extreme volatility that's followed by positive reinforcement.
Like a roller coaster.
Exactly. It operates on intermittent reinforcement, much like a slot machine. If a relationship gives you intense highs followed by devastating, confusing lows or withdrawals of affection, your brain literally becomes addicted to the biochemical roller coaster.
Wow. So it's chemical.
Highly chemical.
Mm.
The desire to go back to the person isn't necessarily about some profound soul-level connection. It's about seeking the dopamine hit that relieves the anxiety they caused in the first place.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though, especially for anyone listening who feels haunted by an ex right now. How do we know this entire concept of unfinished love stories isn't just, giving people a spiritual excuse to romanticize a highly toxic relationship?
That is such a fair question.
Right, because isn't it dangerous to label an abrupt, unexplained ghosting as some kind of soulmate lesson, instead of just calling it what it is, which is bad behavior and a lack of basic respect?
And that is the most crucial distinction we have to make today. Unfinished love, in the context of genuine soulmate connections, is never characterized by abuse, manipulation, or intentional cruelty.
Okay, that's a relief to hear.
Yeah, if someone is continuously disrespecting your boundaries or using silence as a weapon, that is not a mystical lesson. That is a toxic dynamic, full stop.
So what are we actually looking at then?
The sudden endings we are examining from the source material happen in relationships where the love, mutual respect, and emotional resonance were undeniably real and healthy, yet the connection still buckled.
So the foundation was strong, but invisible structural forces tore the house down anyway.
Beautifully put, yes.
Which naturally leads us to look at those structural forces. Because if the love is real, and the respect is there, and the connection is incredibly deep, why does the power go out? Society constantly feeds us this narrative that true love conquers all obstacles, right?
It's a very pervasive myth.
But the text gives us 3 highly practical, grounded reasons why these intense connections snap. And the first one is simply the logistical reality of timing.
Timing is arguably the most tragic factor, honestly, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the love.
Right, it's just logistics.
Exactly. A deeply resonant relationship can easily buckle when life circumstances pull partners in entirely divergent directions. We're talking about immovable realities here, a career trajectory that requires an international relocation or a sudden, all-consuming family illness.
Or just the sheer weight of vast geographical distance.
Right. The emotional connection remains entirely intact, but the physical, practical container of the relationship simply cannot hold it.
It's like having 2 perfectly tuned instruments, but one is playing a waltz and the other is playing a march.
You like that?
Yeah, the tuning is flawless, but they literally cannot harmonize in the same room. But the second reason the text brings up, it shifts from the logistical to the internal. It's this idea that these relationships act as mirrors, exposing emotional lessons that remain unlearned.
This is a foundational concept across so many psychological and spiritual frameworks. Relationships don't just show us the other person, they reflect our own internal landscape back to us with, honestly, terrifying clarity.
Terrifying is definitely the word for it.
Yeah, and a sudden ending often occurs because that mirror has revealed a critical, deep-seated wound that has to be addressed. And paradoxically, it cannot be healed while inside the safety and comfort of the relationship itself.
Okay, let's walk through a concrete example of that mirror effect, because abstractly, it sounds a bit poetic, but in practice, I imagine it's usually incredibly painful.
It is deeply painful. Let's look at attachment styles, for instance. Imagine someone with a deeply ingrained, perhaps unconscious, fear of abandonment.
Okay.
They meet a partner who is genuinely loving, but perhaps highly independent and requires a lot of personal space. The relationship acts as a magnifying glass. The partner's normal need for space constantly triggers the individual's core wound of abandonment.
Ah, so they just keep setting each other off without meaning to.
Precisely. The tension becomes unbearable and the relationship abruptly ends. But it didn't end because they didn't love each other. It ended because the primary function of that connection was to force the individual to finally confront that terror of abandonment.
Yeah.
They have to learn to self-soothe, build internal security, and develop boundaries. The separation itself is the required curriculum.
The separation is the curriculum. That fundamentally rewires how we process a breakup.
Yeah.
I mean, it moves it entirely out of the failure category and into this developmental milestone.
And it changes everything.
Which bleeds right into the third reason we're exploring. The idea that the relationship simply served its temporary purpose. We have this societal default setting, that a relationship is only successful if it lasts until someone passes away.
Which is an enormous amount of pressure.
Right, but the text suggests some people are strictly temporary teachers.
And recognizing the temporary nature of certain profound connections is incredibly liberating. Not every significant relationship is meant to be permanent. Some individuals enter our lives for a specific season to accelerate our emotional growth or to break down a defensive wall we've spent years building.
Or to reveal the specific qualities we truly desire in a long-term partner.
Exactly. Once that internal shift is achieved, the connection has fulfilled its biological or spiritual mandate.
It's like the booster rocket on a spacecraft. It burns incredibly hot, requires a massive amount of fuel, and its entire purpose is to propel you out of the atmosphere.
That's a great visual.
But if that booster rocket stays attached after it has done its job, it just becomes dead weight. The ship can't complete its actual mission unless the rocket falls away.
It has to detach.
And understanding the necessity of that detachment leads us directly into a concept from the text that is universally misunderstood, which is soulmates.
Oh, the term soulmate has been thoroughly sterilized by popular culture.
Completely. Most people picture this frictionless fairy tale pairing. Someone who just anticipates your every need and makes life totally effortless.
Right, just happily ever after from day one. But when we analyze connections that resonate at this intense frequency, we find that soulmates are rarely easy. In fact, they're inherently transformative, which means they are highly disruptive to your status quo.
They aren't bringing inner peace. They are bringing a wrecking ball to your comfortable, stagnant life.
Exactly. Because they resonate so deeply with your core identity, they possess the unique ability to bypass all your defenses. They trigger massive personal growth by exposing your hidden fears, challenging your oldest, most stubborn behavioral patterns, and rapidly accelerating your emotional evolution.
And that's not comfortable.
Not at all. Growth requires friction. A muscle has to tear to rebuild stronger.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this really explains the sheer agony of these specific endings. The energy exchange is so intense, and the depth of that mirror is so profound that when the connection breaks, it just feels like a mistake in the universe.
It feels wrong on a cellular level.
Yeah, but from a developmental perspective, the intensity becomes too much. The growth required is just too vast to happen while intertwined with another person. The separation is forced to allow for individual evolution.
Which brings us to the inevitable question. If the separation is necessary for individual growth and the connection was genuinely profound, well, the natural human response is to wait for the growth to finish so the relationship can resume.
Ah, yes. The 3 a.m. question that haunts millions of people. Will they come back? We know temporary separation is a functional mechanism, so everyone listening with an unfinished story naturally wants to know the odds of a reunion.
The reality there is stark. There are no guarantees.
Oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no external force or framework can promise that a specific person will return to your life. However, when we do observe documented cases of former partners successfully reconnecting after years apart, we see a very specific pattern. It is never just about letting enough time pass.
It's not a waiting game where the clock just runs out. You pick up exactly where you left off.
Not at all. A successful return requires profound, often grueling individual change. Both people must have matured emotionally, healed the core wounds that caused the initial fracture, gained independent life experience, and developed a really rigorous degree of self-awareness.
They basically have to become new versions of themselves.
Yes, when they reunite, they're fundamentally different people building a completely new relationship. They aren't trying to resurrect the old dynamic, because the old dynamic is what failed.
So what does this all mean for the listener who is sitting there right now just holding on to that hope? This is where we run into the extreme danger of the imagined future. Sitting in an emotional waiting room for years is actively destructive to the very growth required for any future happiness.
It creates a state of psychological fixation. When you are fixated on a highly specific, single outcome, namely the triumphant return of your ex, you develop a massive cognitive blind spot.
Your brain just filters out any data that doesn't align with that goal.
Exactly. You risk completely overlooking new relationships, ignoring profound connections standing right in front of you, and just walking past unexpected paths toward fulfillment because you are hyper-focused on a door that is currently locked.
You are so busy staring at the locked door behind you that you don't even notice the entire house has been remodeled, and there's a gorgeous open patio right next to you.
Beautifully said.
You have to demand a total paradigm shift from your own brain. You must consciously stop asking the universe, will they come back? And start asking a much more empowering question. Who is truly meant for me?
And that pivot in language is a pivot in cognition. Will they come back? is completely passive. It places all your agency in the hands of another person, and it tethers you to the past.
Right.
Who is truly meant for me is active. It opens your gaze to the horizon. It acknowledges that your capacity for love might be significantly larger than the narrow, unresolved story you just keep replaying in your head.
But shifting that focus from a past that felt so viscerally real to a future that is completely abstract, I mean, that is incredibly difficult. How do we actually rewire our focus so we aren't just white-knuckling our way through the waiting room?
It begins with a foundational, actionable shift in self-perception, valuing yourself above the attachment.
Okay.
The logic here is straightforward. Healthy, enduring relationships demand self-respect as a birthline. People who genuinely know their own worth act as magnets for partners who treat them with equal appreciation. If a person is still willing to accept breadcrumbs attention from an ex or willing to put their life on hold indefinitely, they're signaling a massive lack of self-value.
Wow. Yeah. And then the text suggests the second step is taking that pain and metabolizing it, viewing the heartbreak not as a catastrophic failure of your life plan, but as vital, rigorous preparation.
Yes, metabolizing the pain is key.
If you can extract the lesson from the pain, whether it's learning to set boundaries, discovering your actual needs, or healing an attachment wound, then the pain wasn't wasted. It was an investment.
And once you metabolize the lesson, you really have to embrace surrender. This means giving up the illusion that you can control every tiny detail of how your love story unfolds. True connection rarely arrives in the exact package or on the timeline we ordered.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because embracing that surrender and opening yourself up to an unknown future is where the work of Tina Aldea Psychic Artist enters the conversation.
It is a fascinating addition to this process.
Yeah, instead of relying purely on willpower to stop agonizing over an ex, people are utilizing a very specific, tangible tool to force that psychological pivot.
Right. It is a truly fascinating approach to disrupting that cognitive loop we discussed earlier. Tina Aldea combines psychic intuition with artistic skill to create personalized sketches of a potential future soulmate.
Which sounds wild at first.
It does. The process involves what is described as intuitive energy readings, tuning into a person's specific energetic frequency or emotional state to identify and then visually render a complementary match.
Now, let's look at this mechanism closely.
Mhm.
Because for someone who might be highly skeptical of energy readings or the whole metaphysical spectrum, how does this actually work on a functional psychological level?
Well, this raises an important question. How do we conceptualize a future when our visual imagination is entirely monopolized by the past?
Oh, that's a great point.
When someone is trapped in an unfinished love story, every daydream, every projection of the future, it features the exact face of their ex. It is a closed neurological loop. Even if you desperately want to move on, your brain literally cannot picture what moving on actually looks like.
Because the reticular activating system in our brain is essentially programmed to only look for that one specific person.
Exactly. But the moment you hold a physical sketch in your hands, a detailed face of someone you have never seen presented as a potential future partner, you introduce a massive disruptive variable into that closed loop.
It breaks the pattern.
Completely. Regardless of one's belief in the psychic origin of the sketch, the psychological impact is just undeniable. It acts as a tangible anchor for a brand new narrative.
It pulls your energy out of the rearview mirror and basically forces you to look through the windshield. You look at this sketch and start wondering, who is this person? What kind of personality do they have? Where in the world might I actually bump into them?
It sparks curiosity.
Suddenly, your brain is actively engaged in curiosity about a new story, rather than just passively waiting for the old story to resume. It artificially jumpstarts that crucial shift from will they return to who is truly meant for me.
It provides the imagination with a new destination. And that destination, a future built on mutual readiness rather than past attachment, is the ultimate goal of decoding these unfinished stories.
Absolutely.
These intense, abrupt endings are not punishments from a cruel universe, nor are they evidence that you missed your one true chance at happiness. They are profound challenges designed to expand your capacity for emotional resilience.
They are life's way of ensuring you don't settle for the middle chapters of the book when the ending is supposed to be spectacular. The objective is not to wait for someone else to finally be ready for you. The objective is to utilize the pain of the separation, to become a person who is fully healed, fiercely self-aware, and completely prepared to receive the right love when it finally arrives.
Because your greatest love story is almost certainly not the one that left you sitting in the dark. The most compelling chapter is still waiting to be written.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the architecture of unfinished love. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
I love these.
We started this deep dive by talking about the agony of a book with the final chapter torn out. We feel cheated because we naturally assume that specific book was supposed to be our masterpiece. But think about everything we just explored today. The logistical hurdles, the mirror effect reflecting our deepest wounds, the temporary teachers necessary for our evolution.
The rigorous curriculum of separation.
What if that unfinished story was never meant to be your masterpiece? What if every incredibly painful, abrupt ending you've survived wasn't a failure, but rather a highly specific, customized training ground designed to forge you into the exact person capable of holding on to your ultimate soulmate?
A training ground.
Yeah. If that is the reality, if the power outage in that movie theater was actually just a fire drill to prepare you for the real thing, what is the exact lesson you're supposed to be carrying forward into tomorrow?
A truly profound question to reflect on as we move forward.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep growing, and we will catch you next time.